Do you want to learn the tricks that top leaders use to get the most out of themselves and their teams? Well, Naftali Hoff is here to help. Lead to succeed. Picks the brains of top leaders to learn about their challenges, insights, and best practices. Here's Naftali.
Hello, Lead to Succeed Nation. It's Naftali Hoff, and welcome to Lead to Succeed, episode 101. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with JR Rivera. JR's teacher said that he would never amount to anything. But in the years since, this straight D student who barely graduated high school has become a businessman living an extraordinary life of limitless possibilities. JR, so happy to have you on the show today.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that we underwhelmed everybody with the intro. So if anything good happens, that they really feel like they got value.
There you go. And as a former educator, I know what it's like to deal with students with straight D's. And I might have had a couple like you along the way, but we all know that and this is a fascinating conversation because I don't want to sort of get into this right now, but I'll mention it. You know, I've got 2 master's degrees, a doctorate, rabbinic ordination, all the certifications you might want from the pure educational system. And yet I so often see, with entrepreneurship in particular, but in life in general, a massive disconnect between the straight A student and the straight A performer in life. You know, not always, of course, but it's just a fascinating thing. And so I think it just gives us all a shot in the arm that, you know, even if education wasn't our thing, we are not defined by that. And we can so outperform that. So, you know, you're welcome to chime in there, or we can dive in deeper, but I just wanted to put that out there because I think that alone is an inspiring message.
Think about it, though. Think about how blessed we are to be here together right now in this time. And I mean, you were an educator and you saw the students that didn't amount to anything. And I was that bad student causing a ruckus, yet somehow now in life, we're here together making magic. I mean, that to me is inspiring. And I'm so honored that you invited me to be here with you today.
I think it's really cool. And I'm so excited for the conversation. So I gave everyone a mini taste, but we'd love to sort of unpack it a little bit more. So tell us your story. And I'm just curious, besides for the actual sort of like the touch points in your storyline, who does your story inspire the most?
Well, the story is simple, and you started off beautifully with my straight D student activity levels in school. I barely graduated, and my parents helped shape and form me. They gave me some real high expectations. Hey, now that you're out of school, why don't you get a trade? Why don't you get something that you can get your hands dirty, get work, and then you'll always have that to fall back on. Fall back on. So I was always being underestimated and underwhelmed, even by my parents. They didn't know any better, but that's the way I came up. And at some point, after my mom passed away, I started questioning everything. And I started asking, 9 years as an electrician, is this what I want to be doing? Hot Florida sun, 100-degree days, I'm melting down with 30, 40 pounds of tools. And I realized it wasn't the path for me. And I had to find something else. And that's how I found my way to real estate, to being an entrepreneur, to building businesses, to rapping with guys like you on a podcast nowadays.
Wow. That is quite the story. I can only just imagine. You know, it's so interesting because I lived in Chicago for 12 years. So I'd often tell people when they would, you know, I guess you'd say, give me grief of how because I'm from New York originally. So it's a little bit warmer there. And then I spent 3 years as headmaster in Atlanta, which is not quite Florida, but it's certainly hot. And if you're there July and August in particular, I mean, you know, I'd walk to synagogue for 20 minutes. I would be like peeling off layers by the time I got there. Absolute. And I would tell people I would take a Chicago winter over an Atlanta summer any day, because you could layer up, you know, but you could never, like, there's only so much you could do when it's that hot and you're out there and you're really sweating and you're asking yourself that question, which I love, by the way. In fact, I just did a discovery call with somebody who's in the coaching and speaking space just a few minutes ago. And I was sort of poking holes a little bit in the profile he's created, sometimes we try to be too much because we have so much to give. So we become generalists and we're trying to narrow it down a little bit. And so one of the questions we always have to ask, and I'm guilty of not asking it of myself enough either, is this really the best route? Is this really what my future can be or should be? Is there more for me if I think differently about my own abilities and about who I want to associate with and where I want to hang out and these kinds of things? So that's a great sort of like opening point to sort of expand our horizon. So I'm sure you have conversations like that. And I'd love to, maybe you have some insight, right? Maybe people are feeling stuck right now. They're hearing this and they're saying, wow, yeah, I feel stuck too, but I don't really know where to go. It's great if he could pull it off, if he could be an electrician. Next thing you know, he's killing it in real estate, killing it on a podcast. That worked for him, right? But so often, the biggest internal block that we have is what worked for him won't work for me. And we start throwing the excuses. So what would you say to that?
I'd say you're right. What worked for me may not work for you. It's not a one size fits all thing, but I will tell you what works for all of us. And the reason that I'm sitting here, the reason that Naftali's sitting here is having an open mind, asking questions, and being eternally curious. You did it a different route than me. You went through university. You studied what they told you to study. You checked all the boxes. You got everything done. Eternally curious, trying to achieve something more because you wanted more. I'm not any different. I just have a bunch of books on the shelf. I have a bunch of courses that I went through. I have a bunch of life experience that taught me what to do and, most importantly, what not to do. And so keeping that open mind, keeping that ambition of wanting more and knowing there's more, and staying eternally curious and feeding that curiosity is a one size fits all answer. But your mileage may vary.
Sure, I love it. And I know we're going to debunk some common I guess you'd say mindsets or thought processes as we go. But one I'd like to attack right now that you hit on earlier when you were talking about your folks and the fallback option. So I hear people say there should be no plan B, right? It's going to be plan A or the highway, so to speak. And yet there are plenty of people, most people, I would say even, really always want to have multiple options in front of them, want to have that fallback. What's your take on that? What's the right approach?
Remember now, no right approach, just what I've learned. So we can keep that clear. If not, then people start raising the little red flags about why that won't work. And I want to help you guys eliminate those red flags and just have a little bit of fun here. But I think you have to be willing to adapt. So instead of thinking falling back, maybe, and this is a popular word right now, I'm sure you hear it all the time, pivot, right? That's a big word.
Very popular.
Pivot, right? All that is that's, oh, this didn't work, so I'm going to just change direction a little bit and go this way. And that's the funny part when people look at our trajectory as entrepreneurs, as business people, it looks like just going way up. Wow, these people are doing so good, overnight success. That's why they think they can't do it. What they don't look at, if you shrink that down to the daily, is there's ups, there's downs, there's ups and there's downs. And we just stay persistent through the ups and downs, making adjustments so we can get to our destination. And so the idea is simple. Have a destination, something that drives you, something that you care about, a mission, a purpose. Don't let anything get in the way. Whether it knocks you around, fine, but keep moving in that direction.
Yeah, I love the answer. And I think that's the reason of all the reasons as to why I have a podcast. Perhaps the biggest one is because, number one, I love to talk to great people and, learn their stories and everything else, but also to bring to my audience the fact that the overnight success that we often see is really the result of two things. Number one, an incredible amount of work that led up to it, but also the unseen day-to-day pushbacks and failures and setbacks and all those kinds of things that we may not put out there, we may not publicize, but they're real. And oftentimes we think, well, I reach a certain level of success, everything should be easy street at this point. Or I did X, Y, or Z, I followed the path and yada, yada, yada. Everybody's is different, but the reality is there are practically nobody out there who didn't work tremendously, suffer significantly, and just stayed persistent and knowing what their North Star was, which is ultimately what allowed them to get to where they are. And that's what most people have to go through, to achieve success.
Amen, brother.
So let's go back to another one, because this one really caught my attention. You had, just so that everybody knows, a number of different statements there. I'm thinking to myself, how is he going to sell this one? The customer is always wrong. What does that mean?
Ain't that
and what does that look like?
And this is a sales mentality. And the thing is that people, what people want to buy and what people need are two different things. As you know, when you get into a coaching engagement with somebody, I'm willing to bet $1 right now that they wanted more sales, they wanted a bigger business, and the first thing you're gonna have to break down is their mindset. Right?
That's absolutely right.
Tell them the more sales.
Just on the call I mentioned before, it was a lot about mindset.
I heard it.
I have to narrow down my niche. What do you mean? I can help everybody.
Exactly. So the customer is always wrong is me pointing out that we, as advisors, as consultants, as coaches, it's our job to help the people that we can help. And that's important, knowing who you can and can't help, just like you said, narrowing that niche. And when we know who we can and can't help, it's our duty to do anything we can to work with the people we can help, because obviously you have a gift that will help them, and that you would be holding out on them if you didn't do that. But doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to want to buy what you're selling. So you have to look at the end result that they want and sell that result. Sure, here's what we got, but let's just work on this first. So they're typically wrong about what they want. You got to sell what they want and give them what they need if you want to deliver results.
Interesting. So here's another one. And this, by the way, as a person of faith, takes on a whole different angle. Here's the next claim. Are you ready for it? God wants you to be filthy, stinking rich. God wants that.
He does. He does. I believe that. And you and I have spoken because you were on my show, and I know we're both men of faith. And so that's part of the connection here. And I think that being rich and money and having means gets a bad rep. And my thing is, God has given me talents, and God wants me to use those talents. And I'll tell you right now, right word from the right person at the right time can change a life. I realized that early on with mentorship, with listening to books and tapes, going through courses, even some educators saying things that just shifted my perspective, changed my trajectory, and put me on this course where I know that I get up in the morning, and whether it's a conversation with you here or one of my clients doing their show, that we're going to change lives. And in order to change lives, I got to be making money here. And it's not just because I'm changing lives. It's because we're doing something good. And when that comes back to me, that gives me more to give. And see, one of my lifetime goals, and this is something that I preach here at the house all the time, and it's not always easy. I want to be one of the most generous people anybody in my circle has ever known. And how can I be generous if I don't have anything? I can't. And so I have my purpose tied into right words, right people, right time. And I'm doing God's work because I think I'm setting people's minds free, giving them another option that maybe I didn't have. And I'm being rewarded for that. And then I get to give. Like, I get to give to my church. I get to give to the school. I get to give to everybody that I want to give to. And God has provided that for me because he knows I'm a good steward of the talent he gave me.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that you're sort of crossing between, the getting into a space that for some people could be very gray because they see materialism or wealth as an end unto itself. And so you say, is that all that I'm here to do? Sort of enjoy this fancy toy, whatever it might be. But the reality is, what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that the wealth is not the end. The wealth is now a tool to perpetuate. It's a tool to continue and to amplify. So here I'm serving at this level, but I'm doing it with limited tools and resources. Now, if I if I increase, if I augment those tools and resources, now I'm able to serve at a higher level. I'm able to bring attention to the right things. I'm able to give to the right causes, and I'm able to serve more people, either directly or indirectly.
I love to give. And it feels so good, but it's hard. And I had a mentor that really challenged me. And his saying is, you can't outgive the world. And so he is always giving an example of generosity. Now, mind you, the guy drives a couple, not, oh, he can only drive one of his Rolls Royces at a time, but he has multiple. He flies in a private jet. He has mansions, but he's the most generous man I have ever met. And all I do is aspire to be like him. And I say, I'm stepping up. I'm stepping up. Like last year, I stepped up with my tithing to the church. First number I thought of was go up 25%. Scared the heck out of me. Did it. And it's done, right? And so that muscle of giving and pushing yourself to give more and give more, I believe makes you a better person. And to me, it brings me closer in some ways to God and to peace. And I feel good about that.
You know, it's so interesting that we're having conversations about tithing and whatnot. And just to give a personal example, my wife and I, so we send our children to independent schools, religious schools. And so, of course, there's tuition involved with that. And for the most part, I remember, for example, when I was a head of school in our community, if I'm not mistaken, we had upwards of 90% of our families on some form of tuition assistance program, right? In other words, couldn't pay the full tuition that the school was charging for their children because you have multiple kids. And of course, it adds up quickly, et cetera, et cetera. I've always been previously, should say, of the mindset of trying to cut a deal, you know, find a way to maybe not have to do my quote fair share for whatever the reason. I'm not proud of it, but I'm just saying part of it always is like, you know, if it was almost like an obvious thing, we'd have to go and make a request and whatnot. This year, for the first time, we've committed, not with all of them yet. So I got to make sure the right institutions aren't listening right now. But we've committed, at least with the primary one, which by the way was the most kind to us when we first relocated, and I was no longer ahead of school, and my future was uncertain. I hung a shingle, but really didn't have the workflow to make ends meet in one of the most expensive markets in the country. They were the most understanding and generous then. We wanted to go all in for them now. And so we made that commitment, and we bit that bullet, so to speak. And I've already started to see, you know, how that's manifesting, let's say. So we're not here. I don't think we scheduled this conversation to bring all of this quote theology to the universe, but at the end of the day, that's almost inevitably what happens, which by the way, I think is really important, you know, in terms of who you associate with. And I'd love for you to talk about this because you talked about your mentor, but your association, right? Your audience, the people you hang out with, the impact of that is significant. And if you're listening to people who are talking about tithing, who are talking about giving back, who are talking about, you know, community service, that it's more than just making money, but it's all about the other things around it, that's going to affect your thought process. And if you hang out with people with a very different mindset, it's going to affect the way you live and think too.
I would say one is affect, the other one's infect. That's the way
nice play
I
on
would
that.
put
I like
it.
that.
But yeah, I think that, and this is one of the lessons that I would have loved to have learned early on, is what you just said, who you associate with, the people that you're around, what they're talking about. And this is something that we laughed about it because I was no good in school and I really was an outcast, and they didn't teach me anything I needed at that time. I felt like when I came out, I had to learn a whole new world. When I was an electrician, right? That was a different world. When I got into business, the world became people. Who do you know? Who knows you? And associating with not only the people that you know, but the people that know you is important in any circle. And so if I could give myself one lesson, it would be get better friends and shut up and listen. Those would be two pieces of advice that I think would have served me well at about 19.
Wow. And you know what? It speaks, JR, to a couple of other things that are very, they really connect with me, but I think everybody would benefit from this as well. You know, when I wanted to hang a shingle, so to speak, become a coach full time and whatnot, I didn't realize just how much selling would be involved, how much marketing and branding would be involved, how much of the back end things that would be necessary to really grow my business. I thought, here I'm going to show up, right? People are going to need a coach. I'm here. Let's do this, right? Building my business, the LLC, every little detail was a learning process for me. So I think it really speaks to the fact that, first of all, learning never ends, and different stages in life require different skills, different knowledge. And you talked earlier about pivoting. So, you seem to be a really great example of somebody who has learned how to adjust, learned to know what he doesn't know and how to get that information. And I think it's so important for people to be able to do the same.
I want to share a story with you that I'm so proud of. And it goes back to what I would have taught 19-year-old me, or how about what I would teach my 8-year-old son. He got in trouble. He got a little, they have a green light, yellow light, red light system of letting us know how he behaved. Mm-hmm. And he got a yellow light the other day, and I came down, daddy style, like, mad about it. So that he knew that I was unhappy. Because I thought, it's just a simple thing. Let's just give him a consequence. Daddy's disappointed, and hopefully that works. Next day, he goes to school. He gets another yellow light. He tells the teacher, listen. What can I do? My daddy's going to be disappointed. What can I do? What can I do to get a green light next time? Think about that question from a 9-year-old or 8-year-old kid. What can I do?
Great question. Better?
Oh man, if I was asking those kind of questions at that age, how much further would I be today? And so, yeah, man, it's this evolution of getting better, getting around the right people, and then asking the right questions.
At least you would have gotten some C's along the way. So let's go back to the other thing that sort of was in my mind. And that is, you talked about how business is all about people. I don't think most people recognize that unless they're really in it and they see it firsthand. But at least sort of like those who are listening, who are aspiring, to move into business, the relational piece is huge, right? And we all know that we buy from people we know, like, and trust. And we know that who is probably the single most, or who knows you, are the single most important considerations, I would argue, even more than the quality of what you can do. Because I know, for example, that there are public speakers whose output doesn't rival mine, if I may say so. And at the same time, they're killing it compared to what I'm doing in terms of public speaking. Or maybe I feel I'm a better coach than somebody else, and yet his pipeline is fuller than mine. Or maybe his rates are higher, whatever that comparative analysis might be. And we all have that sort of, world in which we operate. And what I've come to recognize time and again, that the people who either develop the real quality relationships and or nurture awareness and connection, let's say online, for example, whether it's LinkedIn or elsewhere, those are the people who, for the most part, are getting those opportunities that, quote, the rest of the people are not. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
So I heard two pieces there. Number one was the network and relationship capital, which is the number one thing that we thrive on. Is the people that we work with, for the most part, are people that we know, people that we care about. And if we don't know or care about them when they first come in, we end up knowing and caring about them, because that's our business, is to nurture this message. And we want to help them get the word out about what they're doing, because back to the right words, right person, right time, change a life. We're trying to change lives. And so we have to nurture that. But relationships was something that I learned more when I got smart and left my blue collar job and got into real estate. I became a real estate agent, and just naturally, my curiosity, my drive, the way I showed up attracted mentorship. And that's what I realized was, oh, well, this person took a shine to me, and now I'm getting educated. I'm getting opportunities. I'm getting stuff that I didn't get before when I didn't know this person. Right? And that's where I realized, okay, so it's about who I know. And then later on, as you're doing more and more things, who you know is important and who knows you. Because if you know this guy, this guy, this guy, and they know 10, 20, 30,000 people, well, how's that work? And that's actually how I built a podcast factory. It was people I learned from. And I'm like, man, I learned so much from this guy. Wouldn't it be awesome if more people could learn? And I'd be approaching people that I bought products from, people that were mentors. Hey, you want to rap on the air? You want to just do something? And that's how we started, was those relationships. And then everybody that they knew started knowing me. And
That's
so,
pretty
yeah,
cool.
that's I mean, that's the game. And I think I don't know any business that is not relational selling. If it's like what we do, coaching, consulting, service providers. I don't, it's relationships or nothing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's critical that we constantly look to expand, not only to learn from other people, but just, get connected. And the introverts in particular, and I speak as one of them, you got to find a way. And by the way, I think social media is great in the sense that it does allow for a safe space for many people to be able to connect without necessarily, sapping their energy too significantly, but it's critical. However it works for you, I think it really has to get done. So I want to stay on the podcast point for a minute, JR, because, I'm sure you help a lot of people develop their podcasts. Um, who would you say is your ideal client? In other words, who's the person or the kind of person that you're saying you got to start a podcast? And who's the person that approaches you and says, you know what, not sure this is for you?
So there's a couple ways I can answer that. And I'll go with the one where we met. We met through my podcast, Results Leader, and I invited you on, and we had a good chat, and you started interviewing me on the pre-interview or whatever we were doing back.
I wasn't sure what that was. I was like, wait a minute, who's the host here?
What's going on? Right. I was like, this guy's super interesting because you're asking me questions about me.
But you kept saying, do you have any other questions for me? I'm like, all right, here we go.
But so I'm the same way, man. I hate to sell, and I love to talk and have conversations with cool people. And so the system that you came through was designed exactly for that, for me to be able to meet people, offer my services, and do it all in a cool environment where we're just having fun. And that works for us, right? That's how we meet people. That's how I got invited on the show. I mean, let's just put it out there. If I never talked to you or had you on the show, you wouldn't have me here. So it's a system that we built to make selling and prospecting, business development easier by loading up your calendar with good appointments who could lead to something. And you're already doing a podcast, but you invited me on yours. Is that a win?
That's absolutely a win.
Sure, I'll take it. And so that's the way the system.
You, by the way, are the first of my next 100.
Oh yeah,
I just completed episode 100. You're 101. We're gearing up. We're gearing up.
Congrats, man. That's beautiful. I love that, and I'm honored. 101.
Yes.
But yeah, if you have to sell, if you're a consultant, a coach, service provider, you have to talk to decision makers. We set up a system to make podcasting a tool to allow that whole other process to seem seamless. So the introvert thing, not wanting to sell on stages, not wanting to hard sell or cold call, we eliminated all of that with our system.
Okay. And let's go now to the last question of this segment, which I ask all of my guests: the biggest mistake you've ever made and what you've learned from it.
Oh man, I have so many juicy mistakes, but I would say the biggest, I'm just going to say the one that has my attention, because I don't know that there's a biggest. It just changes where you are in life. And I think that for me, it was something we talked about earlier. It was not getting around the right people sooner. And I started this by joining masterminds. And if you guys don't know what a mastermind is, group of like-minded individuals, business owners get together, chat, share ideas, and their combined minds, as they say in Think and Grow Rich, become a mastermind. Napoleon. And I started investing in masterminds much, much later than I wish I had. And the reason I did it was because I knew I was stuck. I was only doing like 100 grand a year in that business, and I did it 2 years in a row. And I was like, okay, this is no good. And it took me a long time to get to that 100 grand. I hate to admit, but then I was stuck for 2 years. I said, what can I do differently? And I got into a mastermind, and it stretched me because it was more than I could really afford. And more importantly, there were people there that were much smarter than me, saying things that I didn't understand and asking questions I didn't even know to ask. And so if I could have done my business journey differently, it would have been to get around those people and learn the better questions much, much earlier in my career.
I love it. And it's so interesting because literally yesterday, I also run a mastermind group. And so one of actually I've had multiple in the past, but one member shared that in the year since he started, he hit a certain, let's call it his original stretch goal, which was 3x from where he started a year ago.
Wow.
And the guys in the group are pushing him to 2.5x that number. So who knows where we'll be in a year from now, but we're certainly raising each other's expectations, pushing each other to see things differently. And that, I think, is one of the biggest benefits. If I could sort of chirp on the mastermind for a second, just the idea that we're supporting one another, we're asking the right questions, and we feel like we have a safe place to have real, honest, open conversation about what's possible. So kind of neat stuff. Anyway, we're shifting now to rapid fire. And all humility aside, the coolest podcast guest you've had on your show other than me.
I like the other than me. The coolest podcast guest I've had on my show. If I can go back in history, I would say that the most important podcast guest I ever had on my show was a friend who became a mentor and a business partner, and his name is Darren Persinger. And when I wanted to quit podcasting in 2012, he said, dude, you're early, stick to it, just stick to it. And he was right. Changed my life and all the people that I met through him. And the reason we're sitting here today, if it wasn't for that one guy just telling me, stick to it. And I met him when I was doing a podcast, and I invited him on as a guest.
Good stuff. So these ones, I'm just going to ask for just a few word answer if possible. Okay. Something everyone should do less of.
Do less thinking and more doing.
Okay. So you might have flipped me onto the next one. Something everyone should do more of.
More doing.
That was quick. Good job. All right. Killed two birds with one stone. A country outside the U.S. that you'd consider retiring to.
A country outside the U.S. that I'd consider retiring to. I mean, Puerto Rico is a commonwealth, but it is outside the continental U.S.
Fair enough. I'll go with it. And then finally, a productivity tip that helps you get more done.
Turn your notifications off and move your cell phone away from you.
I absolutely love it. Whatever. I'm going to get into social media a whole other time probably, but turning off the TikTok and the Instagram notifications and some others have been absolute life changers for me. Okay. So how can people connect with you, learn more about your work, and benefit from all that you've shared?
I think since you're podcast listeners, a natural move is to look up resultsleader.fm on your podcast player and listen to the show. I think that's the best way to get a flavor for not me, but for the work I do.
Okay, awesome. And we're going to include your website, your handles, all that stuff on the show notes as well. And then finally, JR, because I have to be a little bit selfish here, what's a final life lesson that you could share with us that'll end our episode and kind of send our listeners off to a really great place?
Talk less, listen more.
I'm just going to let the emptiness of the space sort of waft over people as they process that. I think that's gold right there. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure. And to be able to have two good conversations with you in just short order has been an absolute blessing. I wish that all of your dreams and aspirations are fulfilled and you continue to give on so many levels with abundance. And I'm looking forward to sharing your wisdom with my audience, with the world at large, and continue killing it because you're doing great work.
Thanks for the opportunity, and God bless.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode and for investing in yourself so that you can lead to succeed. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Your feedback gives the show more social proof and encourages more folks to listen.